Welcome to the Practice Profit System podcast. Do you own a cash-based practice? Are you looking to start one? Tired of working endless hours and still not making enough money? Want to fire your insurance company? Then you're going to love our podcast. Each episode is full of insights and proven strategies to grow your practice to 7 figures and more, allowing you to take more time off, make more money, and no longer have to take insurance reimbursements. Plus, get a free copy of my book, The Anatomy of a 7-Figure Medical Practice, where I detail my entire journey to creating my own 7-figure practice. Just go to www.srpmedicalmarketing.com/book. You just pay $7.95 in shipping and handling, and you'll also get over $1,197 in free bonuses. That's www.srpmedicalmarketing.com/book. Now, on to our show.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everybody. This is Matt Gillogly with another edition of the Practice Profit System and our podcast. And today I have the lovely Angela Bonnici, or as I was trying to say to her, if I should do it with the Italian vernacular, Bonnici. She is with Super Connect Media. And what we're going to be talking about today is how do you become the ways that you can become the local area expert so that your prospects and your patients won't go anywhere else. And Angela is an expert at doing this with media and public relations. So Angela, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy week to join us today. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Okay, so let's just dive right in. I think when most people hear public relations, they think of like some cheesy person in like a Hollywood studio somewhere going, I'll have my staff call you and we'll do lunch. Like, Dollar, you're beautiful, you're wonderful. But that's not what PR is it? Why don't you tell our folks when you, in your work, you've been doing this for 15 plus years, 20 years, I think is what your bio says.
That's
what is
right.
PR? Why is it important?
Yes, I love your impression of what people think of when they hear PR, or they think of, political campaigns and things like that. Mm-hmm. But really what we focus on at Super Connector is helping people bring more visibility to the amazing work that they're doing and to help them get more people in from their audience to convert to clients. And the way that we think about it is not that it's gross or that, it's self-serving, but more if people don't know about you, how can you help them? And especially as a doctor or medical professional, there's so many more people out there that you can be helping. I'm sure every single listener is the best at what they do. So why not help more people? So that's really the approach that we come into it with, is that if we're able to help people get more exposure, then they're able to help more people with their expertise.
So how do you get exposure? How does that work? I mean, are we talking about just getting on like the local TV station on the 6 a.m. thing and doing Botox injections? Like how do you do that?
Well, that's part of it, not the Botox, but getting on the local news. But the approach that we take is look at, what are your goals and objectives for your practice? So, what are some of the things you're looking to do? Are you looking to expand to a new audience? Do you have a new service that you're offering? And then when you look at those goals, where would your audience be? So at Super Connector, we have a holistic approach. So we're looking at the local news, the broadcast, the radio, but also at podcasts and print and online. For something so specific as the medical world, we look at first and foremost those areas where you are already seen as an expert. So if it's a medical trade that's specific to your practice, looking at how you can be seen as an expert within that publication, because actually I'll give you a little secret, but the medical reporters or the, reporters at the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, they're getting their news, their niche information or expertise from the trade publications. So the stories or the people that you see interviewed for the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal are people that have been read up in trade publications because they're seen as the expert in their space. So that's why. So our approach is usually to get more exposure in those trades, whether it's a blog or a podcast too, in order to get build up the ladder to the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, because there's beat reporters in each area of expertise. And then in tandem to that, there's a lot that can be, now most of your viewers' audience would be, people in their towns or in the cities surrounding, or towns surrounding the city. And so they are like those local morning news listeners or viewers. So what are some of the pain points that those, viewers are having, whether it's, depending on what your practice is, but is it mental health? Is it gut health? Is it, something else that would be specific? And the more localized you can make it. So, if there's an outbreak of the flu in a specific, and it's the worst one in 10 years in a specific area, what can we say? How can you help the viewers boost their immunity this flu season, et cetera? So how can you relate what you do to that specific morning audience? And then those clips or that exposure is really what can move the needle for you and from a local perspective. But then building on that with that other expertise within the trades and some of the national news, all of it really works together. So that's why we do sort of that comprehensive approach of, online, print, broadcast, podcast, all at the same time.
Okay, so what kind of shelf life does this have, like in a local market? So let's say we are talking about, say, flu season. We are clearly entering into now as we're recording this, and this will be released. So we're entering into flu season, but does that have a short shelf life? I mean, flu season is over and done, and traditionally in March and April. What kind of legs and longevity does this have?
Well, that's such a great question. So there's a couple answers to that. So the first is, the way the news works and the way the media works is that they are, the news cycle moves so quickly. So within hours, minutes, right? So, the more timely and topical, the better. So for, something that you would be pitching for broadcast media, you'd want it to be really, really, really timely and topical. Like, even morning of pitching something that you would be, interviewed on that day. But the good news is that really a lot of the value in the media that you get is what you do with it after. So while it might only serve, as information for your audience or for the morning show's audience for, a couple weeks, a couple months, that content that you created can live on your social platforms, on your website, to your mailing list forever. So while it might have been like very timely and helping in a specific time period, that credibility, that clout, that, logo, the NBC morning affiliate logo can live on your website forever. So no one can ever take that credibility away. So it kind of works twofold. One, for what the topic timeliness is in the moment, and then two, for that credibility that can live with you forever.
What's interesting is, and you may not know this about me, but I used to own erectile dysfunction clinics. That's how I got started in the medical space. So, we did, I remember having this quote unquote discussion. I'll use air quotes around the discussion for those of you that are just listening to the podcast, with my partner. And he's like, PR's BS, basically, is what he was saying. I'm trying to keep it clean. And, because he's like, that's just a waste of time and a waste of energy. And very quickly, the PR that we were getting articles on on all these different news organizations, even outside of our market. And we were putting that on our site. And it was amazing to see how even outside of our market in Charlotte, North Carolina, even if we were in the Birmingham newspaper, I don't know how the heck we wound up in the Birmingham newspaper, that instant credibility, right? Like, it has a lot of, so I guess I'm just really agreeing with you on that, because it's so powerful. People don't understand it. Now, so when we're talking about this kind of PR, how does this process work? Like, what is it, is it as simple as putting out a press release? Is it as simple as, or is somebody on staff making phone calls? Walk us through this process to get some of this great notoriety in your market.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for someone like a medical professional that has a practice, there typically wouldn't be a lot of need for like a press release or announcements unless you're opening a new branch and you'd want something. A press release would live over the wire. So you would send it out. It would go to different newsrooms. Maybe if you were doing an event or something, that would be a great opportunity to create a press release to say, we're doing this gala fundraiser event, please come. And then media might show up and take photos and things like that. But I'd say for the regular, like day-to-day or ongoing media that medical practitioners would be looking for is what we call subject matter expertise. And so the way that we pitch that is we'll, talk to our client, see what's going on in their world. So say it's mental health, the implication of most recent shooting, school shooting, like, what can we learn from that? How should parents be, talking to their kids about it, something like that. And we would draft what we call a pitch, which is essentially just an email, a casual email that explains, what the situation is. So another example would be, if last Tuesday was Giving Tuesday. So if your practice group was doing something where you were, donating to your local Toys for Tots or something like that. So you take that timely hook and then you wrap around what, why you're the expert to speak about that topic. So whether it's, it's gut health, mental health, whatever, you would explain why you're the expert to talk about that. You've helped hundreds of thousands of people, or you've helped, hundreds of people with their erectile dysfunction or whatever it is. Give the credibility of what your expertise is. And then say, I'd be happy to discuss more on an interview. And so that's for what we do. That's how we pitch the media. We have relationships with media. So we'll reach out to the people that we know might be interested in covering that angle and then introduce them to our client who has the expertise in XYZ. And we always include their bio, their credentials, any other media in the past that they've been on to show, again, that like credibility and that they're great on camera or that they're a good interviewer, et cetera.
Okay. So, and I'm going to put you on the spot here because, all
right,
everything, I like to do things off the cuff. So can you walk us through like a case study? It doesn't necessarily have to be in medical, but do you have a case study that we can walk through of just how you took somebody that was literally had like zero, maybe local presence, and helped catapult them into kind of that dynamo in their market?
Yes. Let me think of a good example for you. I'm
totally putting you on the spot here.
No, I love it. I love it. Okay. I have a perfect example for you.
All right. Fire away. You got plugged in there?
Oh yeah. Sorry.
The dreaded power cord. You got 8 seconds left to plug in. Yeah. I know that drill. I've had that happen too.
I'm like, how do I do this without making a whole scene?
No, I just kept talking because it's my video that pops up when I talk. So then you're good. You're recovered.
Can you tell this is my second podcast ever? I get other people on podcasts. I never do podcasts myself. So
you're never the one answering the questions. Okay.
I know. So this is like really hard for me. So we have this amazing client. Her name is Dr. Roseanne Kapana-Hodge, and she is a pediatric mental health expert psychiatrist in the Connecticut area. And she came to us. And she is a feisty, fiery Italian woman as well, like myself. And she said, listen, I know I'm the best at what I do, and the world needs to hear me more. And eventually I want to be a TV personality talking about mental health. But, right now my goal is to get more people into my practice group. Yeah. So we started working with Dr. Roseanne and essentially leveraged all different kinds of things that were going on in the news around mental health, specifically with children, and got her. I think by the time, we worked with her for about 2 years, and I think we got over 200 TV placements for her.
When you're talking TV placements, yeah. So that's her on the screen being interviewed, right?
Being interviewed. Yep. And what's so cool about when, we always tell our clients, we want them to be amazing guests from the first time they interview, because if you're an amazing guest, if you're on time, if your computer's not dying, if your lighting and your sound and everything is perfect, they're going to ask you back. And if you answer the questions really well and provide value to their audience, the biggest thing is just providing value to their audience. So every time there was something that we could relate to Dr. Roseanne's expertise, we would pitch the media. And eventually the media started coming to her, because they knew that she was going to give a phenomenal interview. She was going to add so much value. She was going to give tangible and tactical takeaways for people to actually implement with their children. And so people started, the end goal is that like we put ourselves out of business because people are going directly to her for her expertise. And so the specific example I'm going to give you is when it's still going on, but like everything around the environment has really triggered young children to have a lot of anxiety around the planet, around like what's going to happen, like global warming, all these things. And what I think parents didn't realize how much, just hearing about this and hearing, there's always these like scare tactics and things about what might happen. And they don't really understand, right? So if they hear we're not going to have like water in 50 years, like what does that mean for them? Right. So we actually coined a phrase, eco-anxiety, and did a whole media campaign around eco-anxiety in children and got Roseanne, I think it was like 10 different broadcast opportunities across the country. And by the way, what's so interesting, and I think you mentioned this too, is that even though these segments might not have been specific to her local Connecticut market, her phone started ringing more and more for her practice group, even though people were, in different markets. So the power of that media, no matter where it is, can still help you back in your local market. And so from the time she started doing PR with us till for the 2 years that she did it, her practice grew. I think it was like 250% or something like that. Unbelievable what happened to her practice. So, leveraging those timely topics to get her more exposure. And really at the end of the day, the exposure gained her more credibility because yes, she's the best at what she does, but if she's telling someone that she's the best at what she does versus the media, a third party telling you like how great she is, there's much more clout there.
Yeah. What's interesting is I hear this all the time. One of the first things that I hear when I'll do an interview with a prospective client of mine is they'll say something to the effect of, I'm the best at what I do, but nobody knows anything about it. Yep. And when I ask my doctors, I do this rating scale, on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest, how would you rate your medical skill? And I've never once ever had a doctor rate themselves lower than 8. Okay. I always tell them, if you rate yourself a 5, then, you probably want to go work on something else. Right. So like, who would ever want to go to like the doctor that goes, I'm a 4, right? You want to go to the doctor that's an 8, 9, or 10, but their business skill, their marketing skill, they'll readily tell you is a 2 or a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10. And so this constantly puts them in this phase of what I call struggling. Their business is just, they're not going to grow their business by getting better at their skill set because they're already great enough, right? Yep. It's about letting people know how great you are. I love that story. So, okay. So we talked about the importance of getting on that local media, utilizing that local media presence. Is this just a simple fact of doing it one time? Or is this like, what kind of timeline do you normally see with your clients? And I understand not everybody listening here is going to be a client of yours, but I mean, just set this up for them. What's kind of the timeline that this takes to get this going and to continually just get bang for your buck out of this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, if your intention is to get a couple logos onto your website and say that you have media exposure, I think that 6 months or so will get you that credibility. But really in my experience, what the media really looks for is someone that's doing this consistently. I'm not saying you have to do 5 interviews a week, but 1 interview a week or, 2 interviews a month, that consistency where you're showing up as an expert and you can talk over a multitude of different topics or timely events creates you as a media expert versus, someone that has had exposure in the media. So I think it depends on like what your specific goals are, but to really benefit from the power of the media, that consistency is what, for one, really, really shows the media that you're an actual expert. But also that's going to build you up to some of those bigger opportunities that then are going to lead to maybe not only, more clients or people to come into your practice, but also speaking opportunities, other podcast opportunities. There's so many times where I've seen a client get another media opportunity from them seeing them in another media channel, right? Or, hey, actually, Dr. Roseanne is a great example of that. Someone heard one of her interviews and she got booked to speak at this incredible event for conference in her space that she said she would have never, if she had just applied, she would have never been accepted.
Never would, yeah.
So just getting that exposure for just more than just for clients or additional clients, but also for other opportunities, partners, podcasts, speaking opportunities, et cetera.
All right. So I've had folks on here, Rob Kosberg, talking about creating a book. I don't know if you know Rob with Bestseller Publishing, good, very, very good friend of mine. But, podcasts or doing videos, let's say they want to do something that's just kind of a little bit more in-house. How valuable is it to have a book? How valuable is it to have, say, a podcast? What are your feelings and thoughts on that?
I love that question. So people always say, you're not going to get rich anymore off of writing a book. But what it does do is I've heard people say it's sort of like a glorified business card or credibility marker. So specifically for the media, books are amazing. If I can say my client is, the best gynecologist in the state and author of, insert name of gynecologist book, that credibility right there, that they're a published author, is going to, it gives a lot of clout. And also the other thing that's good to know is that if you do have a book that's launching, that's a great sort of timely hook to pitch to the news. So, I'd like to talk about XYZ topic. And my book releases next Tuesday on this very topic. That's going to give more of a hook for the media to want to talk to you, because there's a timely piece of the story that they can latch onto. And what they're measured on is how timely and how topical the stories that they cover are.
Powerful a podcast, because a lot of people, I know how powerful they are, but I think a lot of people are like, well, geez, I really don't have that much to say.
Sure.
What do you say to that?
Oh, I'm curious for what you would say to that. But so, from my vantage point, podcasts are a great tool because you can do cross promotion with other podcasts. So if I have a podcast and I want you on my show, maybe then you'll have me on your show. So that's an amazing cross promotional tool to use. Also, when I am pitching clients of mine for a podcast that have their own podcast, the podcaster immediately is like, okay, they get how to be interviewed on a podcast. They're going to, they're going to have good lighting. They're going to have good sound. Their computer is not going to die. And so they're going to be a great guest, right? So that actually is a nice credibility marker as well. And it's similar to a book to be able to say, published author of this and podcast host to XYZ. So I see definite value. And I'd like to caveat that with, if you don't have a podcast, that's totally fine too, but it certainly doesn't hurt. And it definitely builds like credibility and ability to do cross. I think we usually call them like podcast swaps or something like that.
Right. Yeah. To answer your question. So one of the things is, most business owners, they think of advertising, marketing, new lead or new patient, new client generation as one-dimensional. They think run Facebook ad or run Google ad, client calls, I get customer. And that's not how it works. So the power I have found with doing these kind of things, and it's one of the reasons why I do the podcast. So we do the podcast, there's video, the video streams out, it goes to YouTube, there's snippets, there's all these things because people consume in so many different ways. And, I get asked this. I have a client in Southern California, Dr. Garcia, and she has erectile dysfunction clinics. And she's like, well, how much can I talk about erectile dysfunction? I'm like, how often do guys want to have sex? There's a million different ways to talk about erectile dysfunction. And it's not just ED. It's not just, it's not just talking about the thing. It's say, okay, now you're able to get an erect, you're able to perform. How do you reconnect with your partner? How do you reconnect with your spouse after 5-10 years of not? Like, how do you salvage your relationship? How do you, there's all these different topics, right? Getting into shape, all these different things. to me, the topics are endless, right? I'm here talking to you about PR, right?
Right.
We met, 3 weeks ago in Austin, Texas?
Yeah.
So I just remember you had bright yellow stilettos on. So that's what I remember.
Oh my goodness. Good memory.
So yes. Yeah, sometimes I forget sometimes where I put my keys, but I remember bright yellow stilettos. So
I'm sorry to say I do not remember what shoes you were wearing, but I'm sure they were great.
They were probably some nondescript. No, they were probably my black pair of cowboy boots, which are like my go-to. So
possibly.
Yeah.
No, you make a great point about, people being like, well, what am I going to talk about? Well, first of all, like, for instance, finding other guests to talk about, different, like, their experience or, depending on the structure of the podcast. But I feel like, there's a lot of ways to, and I'm sure you're probably more of an expert in this than I am, but to ask your audience, like, what would you like to hear about? Or, and that's something we tell our clients to do when we're looking for pitch topics or when we're looking to target specific media outlets, is ask your clients or ask your patients, what do they read, listen to? What podcasts are they listening to? Or are they consuming their news from the New York Times still? Where is your demographic? And that can help inform, like, not only where to pitch, but also what to talk about, because you'll know then that it's an interesting topic. But I agree with you, in any topic, like, there's endless things you can discuss.
Yeah. Okay. So you've been doing this 15 years. Do I remember that correctly?
Yeah. Our co-founder says, and I think you've been saying 15 years for like 3 years now. So it's maybe
so we'll go to 18.
Yeah.
We'll round up to 18. Okay. All right. So here's a great, so what are some of the horror show mistakes that you have seen people make? I'm not just talking about your clients, but in the 18 years that you've been doing this, I'm sure you've seen some absolute crap shows of mistakes made. What are some common mistakes that people starting out make?
That's a great question. It really is such a great question. I think one of the big mistakes to make is to think that when you are going to be interviewed, that it's going to be, and hopefully no offense will be taken, but that's going to be about you, right? It's not the job of me as a publicist and of you as the expert is to remember that you are getting exposure and your practice is getting exposure just by being on, for example, like, I'm talking, to you, but I'm also getting, the super connector name is now going to be out there more to your audience. Right. So regardless of if any questions are about, your practice group or about what you do specifically, or, how you can sign on for a diagnostic or whatever, you're still getting the brand recognition. But what the media really cares about is what value you give to their audience. So I think that I've had clients who are super disappointed when they leave an interview and they're like, they didn't ask me about my company at all. It's like, but that wasn't the intention. The intention was for you to show up as the expert from XYZ company. There's your brand recognition right there, to talk about what's timely and topical that the viewers can take away value, or listeners or readers can take away value. So I'd say that's one of the big things, is kind of like a misunderstanding of how it works. And that it's a fail if you weren't able to talk about your book or your company or whatever it is. The other thing is that what we teach a lot in the media trainings that we do is how to weave in those things into whatever questions are asked. So for example, say I had a book and you were asking me these questions, I could say something like, well, actually in my book, XYZ, I talk all about the mistakes that people make when they're being interviewed or something like that. So then I'm talking about my book, but in a very organic way. So there are ways to do that with it feeling organic and not forced. But also if that didn't happen, it still would be a win, I suppose, is my advice there. And then I want to give you like a fun one, like a really juicy example of something.
I would imagine some common mistakes, like you said, are showing up late, not being prepared, right?
Yep.
What are some other common mistakes that you see?
Yeah, I've had someone say, are we on air live? like while they're on camera. Just missing, like not really being present, not understanding like what interview they're even being interviewed for. I've had someone say something about, oh gosh, there's so many examples. I can't even think of just one. But I think the main thing is like just being prepared and just like knowing why you're there, what you're talking about, and also what your intention is of getting out of the opportunity. Is it to inform more people? Is it because you're promoting a book? And remembering, like I always tell my clients to have like 3 bullet points on their, like on a sticky of like the things that they really want the audience to take away. And no matter what questions are asked of you, weave in those bullet points however you can.
What do you say to somebody who said, like a prospective client that says, but I'm really nervous in front of the camera. I don't think I'm very good on video, or I'm not that type of person. Is this a skill that anybody can learn to get out there and to be on TV or be on radio interviews?
100%, 100%. So I would say actually majority of my clients throughout the years, especially those like powerful CEOs or people that are so successful or, the top of their industry, are terrified to be on camera or to like speak about their, industry. And what I would say to that is, the person that's interviewing you probably knows 5% of what you do. So whatever knowledge you're giving in whatever way you do, whether you say 100 times or, whether you camera isn't working, you're still providing so much more value than the audience had before you spoke to them. So just remembering you're being of service, no matter how anxious or nervous you are. We always say it's your responsibility to give the world your knowledge and give it to a bigger audience versus worrying about what you look like, how you sound. So it's not about you. It's about sharing your expertise with others. And even if it makes you feel extremely uncomfortable, it's not about you at the end of the day. It's about what value you can give to everyone else. So kind of taking yourself out of the equation helps people kind of relax a little, like, oh, like I'm helping others. I guess it doesn't matter if my hair is perfect or, I said a billion times or something like that.
Yeah, it's I tell whenever I have a doctor who's getting ready to do just some basic videos, I tell them, like, just pretend you're sitting there talking to a patient. That's all that matters. You're fine, because they're fine usually when they're sitting there talking to the patient. And that's really, you and I are just having a conversation, right? That's all this is. It's just like a phone conversation. We just happen to have video streaming. The joys of COVID, because making Zoom ubiquitous.
I was just going to say, like, that has actually opened up a lot of opportunity and really kind of leveled the playing field for so many people, because now, like when pre-COVID, or even, many years ago, you could only be on a broadcast station if you were in that market. Now I can pitch my clients to New York, LA, even Canada, and they can do a remote interview. And now that like even the, production quality doesn't have to be as strong. Like, people are always worried, well, I don't have a good background. Like, actually, if you watch,
this background right here.
I love your background, but if you watch like, even like people that are interviewed on CNN or CNBC or, they like are just in their living room. Playing field has been leveled so much that you don't have to feel intimidated that you don't have the right setup or that you're not camera ready or anything like that.
Yeah, you can get you can set up a quote unquote home studio for a couple $100, right? I mean, I do have. Today's a bright sunny day, so I don't need my lights, but I do have lights in my office, and I've got $100 Logitech camera that I use, and here we go, here we are. So it's great. Yeah, it's there's a lot of benefits to COVID. Okay, as we wrap this up, what are some final thoughts that you'd want to share? Somebody is listening to this. What do you really want them to? You want to share with them that maybe haven't had an opportunity to share just yet?
Yeah, that's a great question. I want them just to start, just do one thing, see if there's someone in their network that they can do a podcast with, just like this is for me. We met and you asked me. So graciously to be on your podcast. Just start getting used to it. Start sharing your information with more people that could help you share it even further. And don't be afraid don't feel like you have to be perfect. Don't feel like you have to have, a perfect website, a perfect background. Your knowledge is more valuable than anything else. So just remember, you are the expert that could help more people. So just get that message out there in a bigger way. And I look forward to hearing all of your listeners on their first podcast or morning show, etc.
All right. And if people want to get in touch with you, find out a little bit more, see how your services work, what's the best way for them to reach out to your group or to you? And you walk us through that process.
Yeah. You can find us on Instagram at Super Connector Media, and just DM us and we will get back to you and have a conversation.
All right. Fantastic. Well, Angela, thank you so much for taking the time. And I appreciate you sharing all this great information. Glad we connected in Austin. Look forward to seeing you at other future events in Austin and through our friends Ryan and Roland and all that good stuff. So again, this has been Angela Bonnici with Super Connector Media. I think I had that wrong at the beginning. Super Connector Media. Check her out online on Instagram and find out what they can do. I cannot recommend to you enough. Remember, folks, you can spend as much money you want on advertising with TV or radio or print or whatever, but that ability to educate and build trust with your prospect, because for them to spend $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 with you, it's about liking, and trusting. And this media helps you build that trust over time so that you are the go-to expert. So Angela, thanks again for joining us on the Practice Profit System.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor.
All right.
Thank you so much for listening. If you liked this episode, take a moment and share it with your fellow medical professionals, or post a positive comment and rate it on wherever you just listen. Now, don't forget, you can get a copy of my book, The Anatomy of a Seven-Figure Medical Practice, for free. Just pay $7.95 in shipping and handling. Plus, you'll get over $1,197 in free bonus material. Simply go to srpmedicalmarketing.com/book. That's srpmedicalmarketing.com/book. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.